This is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the 13th of December. It's pretty cold in here. The temperature is 50 degrees. 50. And normally it's like 75. So this is like, it's a significant difference. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you are watching on your Echo show, you can talk to the device. Just wake it up, then say, and then your message. If you're watching on YouTube, you can use the comments section. You can also chat via backchannel.tv. And I was also going to say that, if you're listening just audio, like on a regular Echo speaker, and, as if this was a radio program with no pictures, just be aware of the fact that there are pictures if you choose to see them. But if not, then that's good with me. I actually am very happy with you just hearing me, because this is a whole new medium for me, the face. Anyway, long story short, let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today, because we've got so much to do. So many things happening. Lisa's joined us from Alabama. So, Lisa, good morning or good afternoon. It's good afternoon for you, I guess. It must be noon in Alabama, I presume. I'm just getting my head around time zones. I'm in California, here on the West Coast. So if you want to chat to me, please just send me a message. We're going to talk about New Zealand to ban cigarettes for future generations and ask, will the USA ever be able to follow suit? Also, knitters of colour celebrated when Michelle Obama landed a magazine cover in the whitewashed world of knitting. And then a white YouTuber blew everything up. We'll take a look at that story and see how it's a reflection of US politics and society today. And we'll take a look at the life of American author Anne Rice, who wrote this interview with a vampire. She's passed away at the age of 80, and she was buried upside down in a wardrobe. So, lots to talk about, and we'll jump straight into the morning newspapers, because that's really the next thing to do. And, see how the world is looking. Unfortunately, it's not looking great. And you probably know why. It's because 4 devastating tornadoes have ripped through the Midwest. And we're going to take a look at this story and see how it's just upended people's lives. And, I don't want to be political about this because it would be unfair. But, the people who represent these areas, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell, they're always the last people to vote for aid when it comes to other states needing help, or foreign states needing help, or, their mindset is very selfish. And yet here they were, first people to write to President Biden, who didn't even wait for a moment. Do you remember when Puerto Rico got hit by these devastating tornadoes? Or was it the earthquake? I can't remember what happened in Puerto Rico. I remember it was a devastation of insane proportions. And Trump literally held them to ransom. And then there was that famous scene of him traveling there eventually, because he didn't realize that Puerto Rico was America. Did you know that? He actually didn't know that it was America, in the same way that he didn't realize that Hawaii was America, hence why he did the whole birther story with Barack Obama. But the famous scene that took place in Puerto Rico was him throwing toilet rolls at people, desperate people. Incredible. Anyway, back to now and to here. It says, this is in Mayfield, Kentucky. When the winds whipped up, Shirley Poole and her family climbed into the basement and tied themselves with ropes to a pipe. Whoa! That's what you have to do. Then, after the tornado passed, like a train roaring through their historic 1800s brick home, they stepped gingerly up the stairs to find it had ripped off the roof and the second story, smashed all the windows, and flooded each room with dirt and debris. It's unreal, the 54-year-old housemaker said on Sunday. She rummaged through the wreckage in the front room, where she has homeschooled her children, searching for medicine and school supplies. Our whole community is gone, she said. And it's true. I've seen the drone footage this morning. A storm chaser has posted drone footage that is better than the TV news coverage. And, it just blew my mind. And this is climate change in action, isn't it? This is basically what it is, and I haven't really heard anybody saying that yet. Obviously, they're taking time to come to terms with what's happened. But, And the problem is that if Biden uses this as a reason to push forward his climate and social bill, which is currently, waiting for a signature in the Senate or a vote in the Senate, the right will accuse him of taking advantage of a natural disaster. But these are natural disasters of our own making, and they will continue, and they will get worse. Photograph on the front of the LA Times this morning. Bogdan Kaiki surveys the tornado damage in Mayfield, Kentucky. The very first thing that we have to do is grieve together, and we're going to do that before we rebuild together, said the Kentucky governor, Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear, I don't know if you've seen him on television doing press conferences. He cannot stop crying. He's a Democratic governor. He cannot stop crying. Every conference that he gives, where he has to update the death toll, talk about children that are missing, he bawls his eyes out. And I'm like, wow. There are some political leaders out there who have a heart, a soul, and it's actually quite refreshing. He can't talk. Like, half the press conference is us watching him just like getting himself together. Andy Beshear. Newsom benefits from a barren 22 field, it says. Governor faces no major challenges so far, a testament to his defeat of the recall. Yes, this is true. That recall to try and get Gavin Newsom out of California failed. And Larry, do you remember Larry Elder? He was this kind of conservative, very extreme right-wing talk show host that was basically the reason why Gavin Newsom was challenged. I saw him put a tweet out a couple of days ago, Larry Elder, and it said, anybody reply if they think I should run again in 2022 and take the governorship from Gavin Newsom. And the replies were so funny. Because, of course, he didn't even come close, Larry Elder, because the guy's an idiot. He's an extreme, right-wing, far-right aggressor. And he's a black man. I've never understood how African Americans can take these political positions, considering the history that they've suffered at the hands of white conservatives. And yet, he has these views. I mean, my theory on the reason why some people do have these views, especially people like him who are talk show hosts, is because it puts food on the table. He found a way to make a living, which was to be a black person talking like a racist white person. That was his unique selling point. And it put him on the radio for 30 years. Ironically, much of his audience probably thought he was white. So, also Shente, the legendary balladeer, self-taught troubadour, was the last of Mexico's crooning matinee idols. Have I said his name right? Is it Shente? Shente? I think it might be Shente. Vicente Fernandez, romantic, rancheros, and timeless folk anthems define the grit and romance of his turbulent homeland, songs of love, heartbreak, and working-class heroes that made him a cultural giant for generations. Yeah, fans throughout Latin America and beyond. A wonderful photograph of him. Well, it's so interesting, isn't it, how these... I mean, I love the fact that on the LA Times, they give like half the front page over to this troubadour. And I tell you why, because California used to be in Mexico. You are aware of that. Like, the border was effectively moved. And more than half of the people here in California are Mexican, and they speak Spanish. And it's I feel like I'm living in a Mexican state. And I love that. The Mexican people are, in my experience, the most hospitable I've ever experienced. And yet, there's all this, anger and political aggression at the southern border. The southern border? Really? That's a new border, It's a new border. Anyway. Interesting. Stacey, good morning. She said she can't stay for long. She has Bible study at 11:30, but she is having hamburgers for lunch today. You see, now all is right with the world once again. Remote learning is leaving disabled students behind. And this has been a big story, actually, that has been covered throughout the pandemic about, it's never easy to do remote learning. But to do remote learning if you are disabled, in the example they give here of Maya Flores, who is the daughter of this mother that this article's about, is that she's deaf and her teacher doesn't know American Sign Language. So, there it is. It's interesting. Very interesting. I was discussing remote learning with my daughter, and I said to her, do you remember when you started school? Like, she'd never been to school before. It was her first experience of, big school. And it was remote. And she said, I hated that. I just hated it. Because, of course, now she has the perspective of school. At the time, she kind of enjoyed it. It was kind of fun, seeing all the other students on the Zoom. But now, having been to school, the idea of doing Zoom school again would devastate her. Although I suppose she would get to kind of play on her iPad, which is her favorite thing to do. So there's always an upside, I guess. Okay, let's move on with our newspapers here. By the way, if there's a newspaper in your state or your area that you would like me to cover, then just let me know and I'll do it. Because, that's what we do here. It's, it's a truly interactive and bespoke service that we provide. So the Boston Globe is next. They lead with a photograph. A haven or more heartache. After terror-filled trek, Haitians hope to find a home in Boston. Yes, it says after gang members burned down a relative's home in 2018. 33-year-old Jerry fled the danger of his native Haiti and has been trying to reach a stable life in the United States ever since. He lived in Chile until he left this summer, riding buses with his wife and their 2-year-old daughter along the well-worn roads that wind through Bolivia and Peru. They hiked the Darien Gap, a remote strip of jungle and treacherous streams that connect Colombia and Panama. And there's a photograph of them on the front of the newspaper. A friend has opened an apartment to them. Haitians who left Chile this summer. Also on the front of the Boston Globe, local arts leaders denounce rescue bill, say state's plan to allot federal aid falls far short. And calls mount for masking mandate. They say experts see urgent need to limit variant spread. I do think that Americans are not really comfortable with the ebb and flow of a pandemic, right? I think Americans just culturally would prefer a pandemic to look like this. Hang on, graph-wise, to look like this. The announcement of the pandemic, serious, everybody running around, oh my God, pandemic. And then as time goes on, they just want to see this graph steadily slip away. Do you remember when Donald Trump said it'll just disappear? Like a miracle. He said in a few days, it'll just be gone. It's because this is the graph that American culture, and I've lived here for 5 years, so I'm kind of getting into it now. It's like big drama, and then all dissipates. Forget it ever happened. But the problem with an epidemic or a pandemic or anything that is like a virus that is mutating and evolving is that, we started off with this bit. Well, actually, we started off low, didn't we? Because in November, December, word was just coming through from China and Italy. And then come January, people were starting to really recognize this was a problem. But it took till March for any kind of lockdown to happen. It took till March. If you look at the timeline of Trump's presidency, in February, nothing. He knew about this in December. And in January and February, there was nothing. And that was other than closing flights from China, which was just a token gesture, wasn't it? But those months, and there's been a lot of science analysis upon those 2 months now. What would have happened if there had been a full lockdown in January and February? Mask mandate, stay-home orders, remote working. In January 2020 and February 2020, those first 2 months, what would have happened? Now, arguably, it might have just delayed the pandemic. would still have happened. But they accounted, I read about this, that they could have saved potentially over 400,000 lives if the lockdown had come that soon. And for me here in California, the lockdown didn't happen until the March the 12th. March 12th. And I did not go out. I did not go out. I literally stayed in for a year. And it was very hard, Not for me, because I'm a homie. I'm very happy at home, and I love technology, and I have a lot of it, so I was kind of quite comfortable. But for my kids, it was difficult. I mean, I'm lucky in a way that I have 2 children, because I used to think about families that had 1 child. Because if you have 1 child, then who plays with the kid? It's got to be an adult. Whereas when you've got 2 kids, then they can kind of play with each other. And that's helpful. Not all the time, but it is helpful. Or you bubble, with friends. Bubbly, hello, nice to know you're there. Stacy says, I'm the kind of person who likes to stay home too. Well, good. It's the future. We'll be just living in the metaverse from our homes, wearing our virtual reality headsets. So those 2 months were pretty crucial. Anyway, now, of course, mask mandate returning. It says a number of coronavirus cases climb in Massachusetts. A growing chorus of local, state, and federal officials is sounding the call for mask mandates in indoor public places to stanch the spread of the pandemic this winter. I mean, hello? Who is not wearing masks indoors? Who? I mean, I never stopped wearing a mask indoors. I haven't been anywhere indoors without a mask, unless I've been eating, and I will only eat indoors if it is miles away from everybody else. And I know that it's an airborne disease, and I know that there is the potential to, still catch it, but I'm now triple vaccinated. Oh, by the way, I've decided we're not calling the 3rd vaccine a booster. I think that's a mistake. It's a mistake to call it a booster. Think about this. They're now saying that in order to be safe from Omicron, you've got to have 3 vaccines. You've got to be boosted. That's the only way to be safe. They reckon you'll be 75% protected from Omicron if you're boosted, which suggests to me that this is a 3-regimen vaccine. It's not fully vaccinated is 2 and then you get a booster. It requires 3. So I think we need to start thinking of being fully vaccinated as having had 3 shots. Because otherwise, psychologically, people will relax and they'll be like, oh, it's fine, I've already been done. It's like, did you get a booster? I'll be like, no. Now, actually, officially, if you look on the CDC website, 2 vaccines is currently still the legal requirement to be fully vaccinated. Not yet 3. But trust me, that's now, they're doing this in the UK now, and they're going to do it elsewhere, and they'll certainly be doing it in America. It'll be a 3-regimen thing. And isn't it interesting how, like, Johnson & Johnson, these types of one-shot vaccines now, they just, seem like they're not even coming close to doing what we need them to do. As this virus mutates and Omicron evades the efficacy of these vaccines, the J&J, which was only ever a kind of 60-65% efficacy versus 90-95% with Pfizer and Moderna. Isn't it interesting how they're saying if you got the J&J vaccine, the single-shot vaccine, get an mRNA vaccine as your booster. Boost it with Moderna or Pfizer. There is no second shot for J&J. It's very interesting to me. Anyway, here we are. By the way, the show very nearly didn't happen this morning because my neighbor had a truck deliver, and it was a big cube truck, and it knocked down the power lines. There was this giant, because all of our power lines are connected from telegraph poles, and this power line fell to the ground. Fortunately, the power didn't go out, and the internet didn't go out. But I was worried for a minute. I really was. Anyway, here we are, Here we are, together at last. I mean, hopefully, I actually have, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, Carla, you'll find this very interesting, but I actually have battery backup for everything here. Everything. So even if the internet goes down, if there's a power outage and the modem goes out, I have battery backup for the modem. It will automatically switch to battery to power the modem, because the cable that brings the internet in is a passive cable, doesn't require power. Very interesting. I've worked it all out. So, this is where we're at these days. And the only thing that will go out is this big light. This big light is not battery backup, but I have like a little ring light here. So we'll be sitting in darkness. It is literally a panic room, yeah. I'm not panicking. I'm panicking. Just light, mild panic, that's all. I'm trying to move these headphones because I have a zit here on my head, and I just think if I put the headphones like that, then it'll kind of hide it. It's one of those spots that just won't go away. Do you know what I mean? Like, you give it a little squeeze, and the next day it's even bigger. And you're just like, why did I do that? It's like endless. It's very hard having like a big, bald area. Like if anything happens, you're going to see it. Mind you, it's coming into winter now, so I'm going to get my toupee out. And maybe tomorrow you'll see me sitting here with a full head of hair. Prosecutors seek to combine lawyers' rape cases. This is assert similarities part of a pattern. This is against Donald Draper, handsome lawyer, his date and her young girlfriend. This is an interesting story out of Boston. And also, I've got towns that are gone. This is rescue crews on Sunday dug through heaps of rubble searching for survivors in a series of towns and cities across the nation's midsection, following a stunning swarm of tornadoes Friday night, including one that traveled more than 220 catastrophic miles. So that's how the Boston Globe presents itself this morning. Let's move on. Newspaper-wise, where have we got to? The New York Times is next. The New York Times. Again, a photograph of Kentucky. Salvaging the aftermath is the headline. Salvaging remains from a home destroyed in Dawson Springs, a town where scores of residents were still missing on Sunday. And of course, there was that Amazon depot that got hit. Did you read about that? It says nearly every day as Christmas nears. Oh no, is this a story about... Oh yeah, Amazon's share of online sales typically rises as customers turn to the e-commerce giant to quickly deliver packages. To make that happen, Amazon hires hundreds of thousands of additional workers, both full-time employees and contractors, and runs its operations at full tilt. One of them, Alonzo Harris, drove his cargo van into Amazon's delivery depot in Edwardsville after 8 p.m. on Friday after a full day of delivering packages north of St. Louis. Suddenly, an alarm blared on his work phone. Someone yelled this was not a drill. Mr. Harris ran into a shelter on Amazon's site and heard a loud roar. I felt like the floor was coming off the ground, he said. I felt the wind blowing and saw debris flying everywhere, and people started screaming and hollering, and then the lights went out. One of the tornadoes that roared through Kentucky, Arkansas, Illinois, and other states on Friday had plowed straight into Amazon's delivery station in Edwardsville. The toll was grim. 6 people died, with 45 people making it out alive, according to the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker. On Sunday, the authorities said there was no additional reports of missing people, but the search efforts were continuing. I mean, there could have been 1,000 people there, couldn't there? Because a lot of these warehouse-type buildings, which are being increasingly used in industry, they're just like large corrugated iron buildings, aren't they? They don't have much in the way of insulation or, they're almost like temporary structures. They're going to be the first ones to be ripped apart. Very interesting to me. Also on the front of the New York Times, COVID has killed 1 of every 100 older Americans. As the coronavirus pandemic approaches the end of a second year, the United States stands on the cusp of surpassing 800,000 deaths from the virus, and no group has suffered more than older Americans. All along, older people have been known to be more vulnerable, but the scale of loss is only now coming into full view. 75% of people who have died of the virus in the United States, or about 600,000 of the nearly 800,000 who have perished so far, have been 65 or older. 1 in 100 older Americans has died from the virus. For people younger than 65, that ratio is closer to 1 in 1,400. The heightened risk for older people has dominated life for many, partly as friends and family try to protect them. "You get kind of forgotten," said Pat Heishi of San Francisco. "In the pandemic, the isolation and loneliness got worse. We lost our freedom, we lost our services. Since vaccines first became available a year ago, older Americans have been vaccinated at a much higher rate than younger age groups, and yet the brutal toll on them has persisted. The share of younger people among all virus deaths increased this year, but in the last 2 months, the portion of older people has risen again, according to data from the CDC. So, I mean, look, anybody who feels like it needs to, it's enough already. Let us have our Christmas holidays. We've had no Christmas for what, 2 years? Would this be the third year without Christmas or the second one without Christmas? No, it's the second one, because it started in January 2020, which meant we didn't get Christmas in 2020. We didn't get Christmas. No, hang on, it's 2, isn't it? It's 2, because it started in 2019. So we didn't get Christmas 2019 because, no, hang on a second. Did we? It's 2. It's 2. Anyway, I mean, this is the thing about Christmas this year. There is a fatigue now associated with the pandemic. And I can understand that, because I have a little fatigue associated with it as well. All of my family are coming into the US. My mum's already arrived. My stepfather's already arrived. My sister arrives today with her boyfriend. My other brother, stepmother, they're arriving on the 15th. It's a wonderful thing, but they have to be tested the day before they come. The new test has to be done 24 hours before you fly. I actually have to test today because I got pinged by my phone to say I came into contact with somebody who had COVID-19. I don't know if you have this. Do you have this in England, Carl? I'm sure you do. Oh, yeah, of course you do. It's a massive scandal, the pinging. That's right, the pingdemic. It was going off all the time. Well, mine has only gone off twice since I had it. And it went off yesterday to say that I had, or day before yesterday, to say that I had come into contact with somebody who tested positive. So I have some home tests, so I'm going to test today. Because you have to wait a couple of days, But I don't have any symptoms. But it would be kind of devastating. Anyway, we'll have to check that. I think we should do the US news update in a couple of minutes, Carl, if that's okay. Is that going to work? Yes, certainly. Let's talk about this Fox anchor. Chris Wallace is decamping from Fox News. He's an old geezer now, 74 years of age. His father actually was a very famous news anchor, and there's been quite a bit of criticism of Chris Wallace that he's not as good as his dad, which is terrible, really. We had this in England, because we had a very famous news anchor called Richard. Was it Richard Dimbleby? What was Dave? Richard and David are the sons, but what was the dad's name? Oh, what was the dad's name? He was basically the most famous British news anchor. Started off on the radio and then did early television. And his 2 sons, Richard and David, both became very respected news men in their own right. Fred. There you go, Fred Dimbleby. Yeah, the dad was really the big star. I actually worked with Richard Dimbleby. I hosted I did a TV show called The G8 Debate with Kofi Annan and Gordon Brown, and it was moderated by Richard Dimbleby, and he really did not like me at all. It was very interesting. He was really wasn't down for it. But that's okay, He had a job to do, and so did I. Anyway, the story here is that the star Fox News anchor Chris Wallace announced on Sunday he was leaving for CNN, stripping the Rupert Murdoch-owned network of its most decorated down-the-middle journalist, and stridently conservative hosts like Tucker Carlson have increasingly set the channel's agenda. The network has pulled far ahead of CNN and MSNBC in the ratings, with an expanded slate of right-wing commentary that denounces President Biden and defends former President Trump, but some members of its newsroom have been unnerved by programming that has given way to vaccine skeptics or amplified conspiracy theories about the January 6th Capitol riot. Mr. Wallace has expressed concern to Fox News management about a recent documentary from Tucker Carlson called Patriot Purge, which included the false claim that the riot was a false flag operation created to demonize the political right. The anchor's objections, first reported by NPR, were confirmed on Sunday by two people who requested anonymity to share private discussions. Mr. Wallace's contract as host of Fox News Sunday was up at the end of December, and three people familiar with his thinking said he weighed several factors in choosing to leave, including desire to expand his portfolio beyond politics to include business, sports, and entertainment. He'll host an interview program starting next year on CNN Plus, a new digital streaming platform. It's very interesting. I mean, the problem is that Fox News is the most watched news channel in America. More people watch Fox than anything else. And yet, it is the least true. It is the least true. It has the most propaganda. It is, I watch it, not religiously, but I watch it as often as I can stomach it. And, I do the news, so I spend my whole day looking at the stories from factual sources. And nothing they say on Fox is delivered in a factual, non-partisan way. Everything has got a tinge of untruth to it. And it's such a shame because there are more people watching Fox than anything. And so America is effectively being fed misinformation day by day. And, they still claim, some of their hosts claim that the election was stolen, that it was rigged by the Democrats. And, this backs up the 74 million people that voted for Trump with their views that that Biden is an illegitimate president. And the problem when you have that many people who don't believe that the president was elected fairly is that's when a civil war will ensue. The insurrection was just the start of it. But trust me, these people are angry and they are weaponized and they are hearing day in, day out more evidence from Fox News to suggest that the election was stolen. It's terrifying because in America there's no requirement for the news media to tell the truth. That was, the idea of having a balanced news service, that was eradicated in 1987 by the Reagan government when the Fairness Doctrine was abolished. And even then it didn't have to be true, but you just had to have both sides. Well, there's no both sides anymore. And the problem is that CNN, where Chris Wallace is going to be moving to, is, in my opinion, an overly dramatic version of the truth. So they do report the truth, but they dramatize it and they theatricalize it, and it becomes more... It's quite fear-based. And I do believe that the news media in America has made the country a nation of scared people. Scared of government, scared of military, scared of police, scared of immigrants, scared of neighbors, scared of society. And it's a shame because there's no reason to be scared. You just have to be able to intellectualize your reality. And that's hard for some people. It's hard for me. Anyway, the other thing I was thinking that would be quite interesting is, that CNN just fired Chris Cuomo, the brother of Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York. Well, he had a very good slot, and I wonder if Chris Wallace is going to fit into that slot. I have a feeling he will, because the timing's very interesting, because Chris Cuomo was literally fired 4 days ago. I mean, he was suspended about 2 weeks ago, but they announced that he would not be returning. So that slot now is available effectively. And Chris Wallace is a good fit for that. But it is interesting that Chris Wallace, people always said, oh, Chris Wallace is a Democrat and he's working for a right-wing news agency. And it's a bit like Joe Manchin being a Democrat, isn't it? A bit like Joe Manchin, who is very openly conservative in West Virginia, with his love of coal and his family in the oil business. But I recognize that, some people, for some odd reason, I don't know why, they choose to be in the wrong party or on the wrong channel. Maybe they feel like it's their duty, or maybe they're a mole. I mean, I have theory with the senator, and this is just my opinion. This is not fact. Is that I actually think he works for the Conservatives, for the Republicans. I actually think that his supreme leader is Mitch McConnell. It's not Joe Biden. I think he takes his direction from Mitch McConnell. That's how it feels. And he's a mole. And he was put in there, in that role, to pretend to be a Democrat in a state that effectively is being run like a Republican state. I mean, it's the second poorest in the country. Anyway, let's jump on the US news update, and then we'll come back and look at some more newspapers. And if you'd like to join in, well, you know where we are. You know how to do that. Luke's joined us as well. Harper's here. Stacey had to go, so thank you very much for being with us on the show this morning. Wherever you are, whoever you are, this is Backchannel. And here's US news update. It's Monday, December 13. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said on Sunday that widespread damage is making rescue efforts a challenge in his state after tornadoes swept through the region 2 days ago. I've got towns that are gone, Beshear said. My dad's hometown, Paxton, isn't standing. It's hard to describe. The devastation goes on for a dozen blocks in some places, and there are many people without power, he said. The state has a strong rescue effort in place, but the damage is prohibitive and will take time. He said at least 56,000 homes were without power. Beshear could not provide a number of people in his state who've been reported missing. He said in his family's hometown, Dawson Springs, the list of unaccounted ran to 8 pages, single-spaced. It's pretty bad, he said. Deanne Criswell, administrator for the U.S. Federal Emergency Management Agency, said rescue efforts are ongoing across the region and there is still hope to find survivors. Meanwhile, 3 doses of a COVID-19 vaccine is the optimal care, but 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech or Moderna vaccines or 1 of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine remains the U.S. government's official definition of fully vaccinated. Health officials will continue to evaluate what should constitute the official designation, said Dr. Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and President Joe Biden's chief medical advisor. It will take months to tell whether annual booster doses of the vaccine are needed, Fauci said, adding he is hoping from an immunological standpoint that 1 booster dose will be enough to provide protection greater than just the 6 months offered by the initial vaccine. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel. And we're back. Hello. Welcome back. I'm Anthony. That was the US news update. Sorry, the screen went black if you were just watching. But that's a podcast that I do every day. US News Update. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts if you want to hear the news in 2 minutes. Harper's joined us. Rachel's here. Luke's with us. Bubbly as well. Thank you for spending your morning with Backchannel and Lisa. Don't forget Lisa. We're looking through the newspapers at the moment on this Monday morning. It's December 13. Been looking at the number of people killed by coronavirus. of every 100 older Americans. Also, Haiti's leader had a list his assassins wanted, implicating politicians and businessmen in the drug trade. And we've also been looking at this story about the Amazon depot being hit by the tornado, or one of these 4 tornadoes that hit the Midwest on Sunday. Or so, actually, it was throughout the weekend, wasn't it? Saturday. So that's how the New York Times leads this morning. Let's jump on next to the San Antonio Express News. We actually do this one for Stacey, but she's had to go. But I'll do it anyway. Foster care workers warn of dangers. It says untrained adults have no authority at temporary sites. Women face barriers on road to being firefighters. It says, in one sense, Rebecca Lemansky was carrying a family tradition when she started classes at San Antonio's College Regional Fire Academy in 2017. Her grandfather, father, and brother were volunteer firefighters. But in another sense, she was blazing a trail, or trying to. It says women make up just 8% of the nation's 1.1 million firefighters, according to the National Fire Protection Association. Lemansky cannot recall encountering a female firefighter in her hometown in South Carolina. She says, I want to be that role model for little girls. I want them to look at me and go, oh, she's doing it, I can do it, because I didn't have that really growing up. So that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you know, when we talk about kind of equality, certainly in the workplace, are there some jobs that females would be better off not doing? Because women can be as strong, if not stronger than men. That's been proven time and time again. Not just physically, definitely emotionally. But I mean, I don't know. I suppose if we're living in a time of gender equality, then who's to say that you can't do whatever you want to do? And, you know, we finally have, how many decades did it take to get female astronauts? You know, why were the first people on the moon men? Buzz Lightyear and Louis Armstrong. You know, why do they have to be guys? Also on the front of the San Antonio newspaper, saving the edge of night, development threatens stellar views of skies in Hill County. Interesting. So one of the biggest, closest, and most visible planetary nebulae to Earth, the space phenomenon known more commonly as the Eye of God, and an amateur astrophotographer can see it from his Dripping Springs home. The night sky is extraordinary, he said. A lot of people don't even know what's up there, but this is something that we could lose as a civilization, our appreciation of where we are in the universe. I've actually been doing over the weekend a lot of study about the creation. I don't know if you ever have this conversation with yourself. The religion versus the science argument. I've been thinking about it a lot because I had a conversation with somebody and we were discussing that they had religious views about the creation and I had secular views about the creation. Well, not even secular views. I had scientific views about the creation. And I was saying, you know, is it possible for these two to coexist? And the analysis that I did over the weekend was that out of 100 scientists that studied this, there was a group of 100 scientists that really kind of got behind this debate between religion and science when it came to the creation, that 7% of the scientists out of these 100, so 7 of the 100 scientists, also believed in God. So that they believed that the Big Bang Theory and, you know, the space-time continuum and all of these things, you know, that made the creation. But they also believed in God. And is it possible to believe in God and also believe in the dinosaurs? Because surely if you believe that the earth was made in 7 days by the Lord, where do the dinosaurs fit in 65 million years ago? Do you not believe they existed? I mean, we have an awful lot of fossils now, and bones and teeth and all sorts. So does the discovery, and also like the genetic code, discovery of the genetic code has helped, you know, we've worked out how humans were formed. We've worked out how, you know, do you even know what the first life form was on the planet? I mean, this is something else I looked into recently. Any idea what the first life form was? You'll never get it, because, it's quite obscure. Carla? A cockroach. That's actually a very good guess. I think a cockroach has got too many moving parts, though, to be the first thing. Because you would have to evolve to get legs. Do you see what I mean? You would have to evolve to have tentacles. Flea's got too many moving parts. It's an organism that is living, but is very basic. A what, sorry? Amoeba? No, not an amoeba. I'll happily tell you, though, but I do enjoy a guessing game. Don't look it up. Don't you dare look it up. I can see you typing away. This is the whole point of this, is that we're using our mind to think about what could be the first living organism on the earth. It's not the first animal. It's the first organism, the first thing that had life. I'll give you a clue, right? We're a water planet, aren't we? This planet is mostly water, was always water. The Earth, arguably, the ground was created in this explosion. Close. You're very close with seaweed. Very close. Algae, that you're getting further away now. Let me tell you what I was going to do with one of these things, because you can buy them now. They exist. You can buy them. We actually use them, weirdly. I wanted to put one in a glass container and have it like as a display in my apartment. And then people would be like, why have you got that there? And I'd be like, because it was the first organism on the planet. And I'm just paying my respects. Stop looking it up, Carla. You're too inquisitive. Let me tell you. I'm just going to tell you. You ready? It was a sponge. It was the sponge. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because, the sponge is it's barely alive. A sponge is barely alive. It really is it's really a very pathetic creature. But it's kind of nice to know that it's a thing, Riyadh, good morning. Thank you for joining us here. We've got Harper and Casey and Rachel, Luke, and who else is with us? Oh, Bubbly as well. Stacy, Lisa. We're just backchanneling at the moment together. 9:47 here on the West Coast. I feel like we are, this conversation about creation and what came first we could do this conversation for the rest of the show if we needed to. There is so much depth to it. And I was asking that if you have religious faith, if you have a belief system that involves, Riyadh said, what's up, Anthony? Well, all is good, Riyadh. That's all I can tell you. All is good. If you have a belief system, a religious belief system, does that mean you don't believe in dinosaurs? Does that mean that you're if you believe that life started with the Old Testament, Adam and Eve, and the creation as described in the Bible, then you can't really have room for the scientific discoveries that we have made recently. And of course, the Hubble Space Telescope, Mr. Hubble himself was one of the people who discovered how our galaxy originated and has an answer for it. These are the people that really kind of had to... interestingly, they were respectful enough not to try and become kind of religious deniers. Because I think that's the problem, isn't it? We just presume that if you have a scientific answer to something, that means that cancels out the whole religious argument. And I don't believe it does. I believe that the two can coexist. And some people need a belief system. Some people, it is essential for them to have a God, because of course if you're in the Muslim faith then you pray to Allah, whereas if you're in the Christian faith you pray to God. They both can't be right, but to them they are. And that's my point about why a belief system is essential, because entire communities of people need a structure with which to live their lives by, and other people don't. I personally don't have faith, but I don't disrespect other faiths, because there's enough room for everybody. I've often said that if every individual on this earth, 7.8 billion people on this planet, if we all had an individual different belief system, I still think there'd be room for that too. But at the same time, religion has been the cause of most of the fighting, the destruction, and the death in this world. You know? Over territory and over land and over beliefs. It separates people, divides people. It's tribalism. There's a lot of contradiction in this argument. Yeah, Einstein was another one, a bit like Mr. Hubble. The two of them probably, over a cigar and a lager. They probably had this conversation over and over again. And then, I often think about, like, if we were to send a rocket into space, and let's say we were able to track it continuously, like it never went out of signal. So obviously it wouldn't be on AT&T. But if we would be able to track it and have it just keep going, do you think it would continue just sending back a signal? Or at one point would it just like bounce off? Because a lot of the drawings of how the universe is built and like gravity is to do with the distribution of weight, and it's just very interesting. I mean, I just wonder if the rocket would ever hit the end of anything, or whether it truly is infinite. And with an infinite galaxy and an infinite space, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Just think about that. We are living in infinite space. This planet, this little planet that turns, is floating in an infinite space. It's not even possible for the human brain, certainly my little brain, to comprehend this. The idea of something going on forever. Because, of course, if you walk in the air, around the Earth, you're eventually going to come back and meet yourself. Obviously, you'll need a boat and a couple of planes, various different methods of travel. But we are fundamentally a water planet. The other thing I learned recently is that the dinosaurs, I mean, they didn't know territory or borders or religion. They just roamed freely. But, there was billions of them. I kind of thought that there was maybe a few dozen dinosaurs. There was like 2 T-Rexes, one in the northern hemisphere and one in the southern hemisphere, and they ruled the world. There was billions of dinosaurs over billions of years. This was actually quite a new discovery. This was announced maybe a year or so ago. Do you know about this story, Carl? It was very interesting. They discovered that there was a shed load more dinosaurs than they thought. It's about a year ago they discovered this. There were gazillions of them, and they were everywhere. I mean, this is so fascinating to me. I really, it blows my tiny mind. So do you ever kind of feel that desire to kind of really analyze? And I've said this to people who have faith. Would you ever consider the alternative argument? If you believe in God and the creation and Noah and the ark and 2 by 2 and the whole, all these stories, the floods, do you believe in that and still have a desire to look at the scientific alternative and to consider that now, because we have these telescopes and because we're able to send probes up into space and because we're able to do mathematics on an extreme scale, because we have computing power that enables us to do that? Because remember, Einstein and Hubble and all these people, they did all of their equations on paper. Their brains were so evolved, they did it all on paper. But now we have computations done by supercomputers. It's a completely different world now. We're able to kind of work stuff out. And they have worked out that, the universe and certainly the Earth was created in a certain way. And it wasn't an explosion. It didn't happen in an explosion. I think that confuses people. I think that's kind of because it's called the Big Bang, and people think that it's therefore an explosion. But I don't think it was. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't that. And, as a religious person, do you ever have a telescope on your deck and look out at the stars at night and think about this? Because, of course, in the Nativity, the story of the Nativity, the kings, the wise men, they followed the star. That brought them to Bethlehem. It brought them to the scene of the Nativity and the birth of Christ. But where was that star? Was it in outer space? Was it in this nebula? Was it another planet? How is it worth having these conversations, or is it are we just better off not having these conversations? Would we be better off just allowing people to, stick to their traditions and just leave it at that? Or should we continue question? Because to continually question, to me, is like to exercise the mind. You don't have to stop believing, but it can give you a greater sense of understanding, give you a greater sense of who we are. I mean, I don't know who I am half the time, but I think you know what I'm saying. And I went on YouTube to try and see if there was any short form videos, just 20 minutes of somebody explaining all of this. And do you know something? Doesn't exist. The closest I got was Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is a wonderful scientist and a physicist. I think he's a physicist. And he, tried to explain this. But it was a very informal video. And he says he steers away from this debate, religion versus science, the creation versus the Big Bang. And of course, then you have Stephen Hawking, who wrote that book called A Brief History of Time. And Stephen Hawking, well, actually, I didn't meet him, but I saw him. I went to the Paralympics ceremony when the Olympics happened in 2012 in London. And I saw him there. He was in the show. They actually, he wheeled himself on in his wheelchair. It was just a few years before he died. It's I can see Stephen Hawking with my own eyes. It blew my mind. That guy's brain was on another level. That guy was able. He was our modern Einstein, wasn't he? And yet, there is still, the jury is still out, despite all of these contributions from all of these great physicists about how the planet was born. But it's not enough for some people. And the reality is that, the movie that he was in, not Stephen Hawking, but an actor playing Stephen Hawking, was called The Theory of Everything, wasn't it? And the important word there is theory. Because all of these are just theories. And it's very interesting that science is obviously so factual in so many ways when it comes to, immunization or medicine. But when it comes to physics, science is a theory, the theory of relativity, the theory of gravity. It's almost as if they preempt their findings with a word that enables people to still go looking for more. This might be the answer. And it is an answer, but it's not necessarily definitive. And then that word everything, that's actually, I think, a throwback to Douglas Adams's book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Because he wrote a sentence that has been used ever since, which is life, the universe, and everything. Do you remember? And so the theory of everything, I think, was a play on the Douglas Adams Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was like a comedic, satirical, entertaining book about, and was turned into a television show, a movie, and everything else. But the word everything is just so hilarious, isn't it? Because it kind of references that there's way more that we can't even put into words. We can't even explain what is beyond the universe, so we'll just call it everything. The life, the universe, and everything. And this is kind of where it's at now. It's kind of nice to not know. I mean, I actually enjoy not knowing. Do you ever do that? Do you ever think to yourself, I don't really want to know the recipe to that delicious meal. I don't really want to know the answer to that equation. I enjoy not knowing. And I think, when I was younger, maybe I just wanted to know everything, and now I'm really not interested. Okay, we're going to go to a new newspaper now. The website is reformer.com. It's called Not Real News, a look at what didn't happen last week. Now, I have a bit of a weird theory about this, because the Associated Press or Reuters or one of the news agencies does this. They have a little section on their website of what didn't happen. And I'm just like, there is so much misinformation out there that I worry that if you create a kind of virtual newspaper, it only goes to dilute the offering that comes from those claiming to report the truth. Anyway, it says a roundup of some of the most popular but completely untrue stories and visuals. None of these are legit, even though they were shared widely on social media. EU leader has not called to scrap Nuremberg Code. It says, the claim was Ursula von der Leyen, the chief of the European Union's executive arm, has called for eliminating the Nuremberg Code. Well, the facts are, speaking at a press conference, von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, did not call for scrapping the Nuremberg Code, which is a set of ethical research principles intended to protect people from involuntary experiments and abuse. In fact, she never mentioned it. She called on EU countries to consider making COVID-19 vaccines mandatory. And critics of vaccine mandates have repeatedly claimed that such policies violate the Nuremberg Code. But experts say that is incorrect because the COVID-19 vaccines aren't experimental. And false claims began to appear around von der Leyen's comments last week when several conservative blogs published posts featuring the inaccurate assertion in their headlines. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Nuremberg, of course, is where isn't it where the Court of Human Rights is? Because the Nuremberg trials are very famous in our history. And I do feel like, Nuremberg is a bit like Brussels and what's the other one that's not Brussels, where the European Commission is based? But anyway, Strasbourg, that's where I was thinking. Strasbourg and then, of course, Nuremberg is famously from 1947, the military tribunal in Nuremberg where Nazi scientists who conducted heinous experiments on inmates in concentration camps were prosecuted after World War II. And didn't one of those guards die recently? The last guards died recently, and he was actually put on trial quite recently. I don't know. There's a lot of history there. I don't want to confuse it and say the wrong thing. Something in my eye. That's what it is. Maybe my eye. Maybe it's the nebulous of the universe is in there. Do you ever think that? Do you ever look into somebody's eye or look at your own eye and think that is the whole universe in there? I do. I look in there and I see, because there's nothing that looks like an eye. Nothing. The eye is so unique, and it's so beautiful, and it's so deep. My eyes are blue, grey, and green. I have 3 colors in there, as well as black, obviously, in the iris. And I look in there sometimes, and I'm like, I can see the whole universe in there. I can see the birth of my children. I can see, everything. And that's why people do turn to religion, because they think it's not possible that people as advanced as humans can exist unless a higher purpose has created it. Because we are literally touched by the hand of God. It seems that way. Anyway, that's very interesting, that story about Nuremberg and people putting out false information, claiming that it's against the Nuremberg Code. Crazy, isn't it? Here's a good one. It says, posts cite old interview to falsely claim BioNTech CEO isn't vaccinated. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it, with this kind of right-wing media who claim to, and the problem with media being archived in the way that it is online. People can just look for anything and find it because it's completely out of context. The claim was that a video shows, that the CEO of BioNTech, Dr. Ugar Sahin, will not take the COVID-19 vaccine that his firm developed with Pfizer. The reality is, and the facts suggest, that social media posts are misrepresenting an interview that Sahin gave in December 2020. He received the vaccine the next month. A company spokesperson confirmed social media users shared the year-old interview from the news outlet Deutsche Welle to erroneously claim the CEO of the German biotechnology firm, which developed a COVID-19 vaccine with Pfizer, won't receive the vaccine. Dr. Ugar Sahin of BioNTech, an inventor of the BioNTech Pfizer jab, refuses to take the jab for safety reasons, stated one widely shared tweet that cited the December 2020 video. But that interview took place early on, just as the vaccine rollout began. Answering a question about why he was not yet vaccinated, Sahin said that he was legally not allowed to take the vaccine at the moment, and later explained that he was not in a priority group at that time to receive the vaccine. He also said it was more important for us that our co-workers and partners get vaccinated. He said our goal is to produce more than 1.3 billion doses in 2021, and that can only be done if we can really continue to work 24/7 without any interruption, and we need to ensure that we protect the co-workers and our team members from COVID-19 because that would mean interruption and delay. I mean, how do we expect anybody to really get a sense of the truth of what's happening if there's these false claims everywhere? I mean, it is hard for people. And, you used to be able to trust the networks, and those are increasingly falling foul of public opinion. There's always 5-minute news, incidentally, very, very trustworthy news source. COVID-19 vaccines don't cause immunodeficiency syndrome. This was a claim that vaccines are causing a new illness called VAIDS. Short for vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. VAIDS is not a real thing. It's not a condition. Nor does COVID-19 cause a syndrome matching this description. I mean, they do it because, and part of the reason why they do that is because VAIDS sounds like AIDS, and they are now, because, there has been some data recently suggesting that people who are immunosuppressed might have been the cause of the Omicron variant. It might have mutated in people that are immunosuppressed. And that could be people with HIV. And so that now is going to turn out to be something where there will be a small portion of people who will try and pin that on the gay community. Such is the world that we're living in now. They care nothing for the facts. Anyway. If you want to talk back to me, you can just wake up your device and then say, and then your message. You can also chat directly on backchannel.tv. And if you're watching on the YouTube feed, then you can just comment there in the comments section. It all comes through to me. So just send me a chat, Remember, say is the magic word, and then your message. And if you're listening on an Echo speaker, just grab your phone, go to backchannel.tv and join the chat that way. That's backchannel.tv. Now, interestingly, Volley has a growing list of shows here on Backchannel, including Haley and Allison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs, and their one-star cinema review. You've also got Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Or your pal Hal, that's Hal Rudnick. He will be here after the show in about 45 minutes' time at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So Backchannel just keeps it going for you. Talking of which, let's jump straight to Virginia now, to the freelance star. Excuse me. Sorry, what? Oh, Riyadh. That's right. He says, when do we hold media providers responsible for this information? Well, I mean, I believe in press regulation. I really do, you know? He's like, what's the current European Union vibe in the UK like now? What you mean, regarding the relationship between Britain and the EU? I'd say it's irreparably damaged. That's what I would say. Misinformation. Yeah. Well, look, there's two ways of looking at this, depending on who you are. I mean, I actually tweeted the other day, I will never get over Brexit. I will never get over Brexit. To me, it was one of the saddest things I've ever witnessed politically, you know. It just made me so sad that my country of birth could be so short-sighted as to think that that was like a good thing. And now, of course, they're seeing all of the downside to that, which is that, you know, they couldn't get gas and there's nobody to drive trucks and there's no food on the shelves and, you know, various things that they've realized that the supply chain is all from the European Union. And so the relationship is fractured. And then, of course, there's this deal with Northern Ireland, which has not yet been agreed. Boris Johnson never actually read the agreement, never read it, signed it off, but never read it. And this is a bit like Trump not reading the Constitution or not reading the Iran nuclear deal or not reading the Paris Climate Accord. You know, like you have to have the kind of intellect and time that affords you the opportunity to sit and study. And these characters, Johnson is he just likes to make babies. He's busy doing other things. He's one of these people, Trump was the same with coronavirus. They're like, if you close your eyes, it goes away. Just close your eyes and like all of the problems disappear. This is the result of being a narcissist. Johnson is a narcissist. You close your eyes and it goes away. But in England, the media is regulated. So, you know, the newspapers are not regulated in the same way that the television and the radio are. It's slightly different. And the newspapers can print stuff that's not true. They just then have to print an apology. Whereas the television can't say stuff that isn't true if it's being presented as truthful. It has to be true. And if it's not true and somebody complains, if somebody makes a complaint to the regulator, then it will be investigated and the channel could lose its license. And that's how it works. And it's worked very well for years. And I was on the radio as a talk show host for nearly a decade, and I never once felt that I was prevented from speaking freely because of these requirements. Because we are required to bring balance. So if I'm speaking the truth, then that's fine. If I'm saying something that is very clearly my opinion, then I invite somebody onto the show to give their version of events. So that it is balance, that you can hear balance in conversation. But in reality, it doesn't stifle free speech, because free speech should be true. The only speech that is often that we don't need is hate speech. And this is why America is really, in my opinion, is so in need of regulation, because hate speech has become defined as free speech. And so when Trump calls all Mexicans rapists and criminals, as he did on television, that is hate speech. That's not free speech. And so at that very moment, I mean, he was protected by presidential privilege, but I mean, you know, you just can't say stuff like that. And in England, we don't say stuff like that in public. Plenty of people say it in private, but it's not said publicly. And you know, if somebody tweets it in England, the police go round to their house. If somebody tweets hate speech in the UK, and it is reported, or somebody reports the tweet and says this is offensive and it's about me, the police will go round to their house and arrest them for a hate speech crime. And that is not something that happens in America, because they say it's the land of the free. Well, look where that got us. So you're right, you know, when do we hold media providers responsible for misinformation? Now is my answer to you, now. But it won't happen. I mean, some of it, I guess, could be in one of Biden's bills, in the voting rights bill. Maybe there'll be something about misinformation. I'd like to think so. But it's very interesting to me that, we are living in a world now where you are expected to work out the difference between true and false. And I was talking to somebody who works in the shop where I buy these spectacles, and she said, I was like, where do you get your news? And she said, I watch a bit of Fox and a bit of CNN so I can kind of get a bit of both. And I was like, why would you do that? Why would you watch something that is untrue and something that is overly dramatic when there are other news sources out there that are just much more factual? Because I don't believe you do get balance, because you're if you go to Fox, you're going to get a very weighted argument and opinion that is dressed up as fact. So you can't differentiate and go, oh, well, I'll get a bit of that side, because none of it is true. And then CNN has their own agenda, the over-dramatic version of the truth. But Riyadh says misinformation is the consistent between left and right. Is that constant? Maybe. I really feel like we are on the cusp of something, though. I really feel like off the back of this, there will be some change. But I just know that America does not do regulation lightly. And because people think that their freedom and liberty would be undermined by some kind of, press regulation. It was okay for Donald Trump to say that the press were the enemy of the people and they were fake news. I mean, to me, that is fascism, isn't it? That's like one of the first warning signs of fascism is denigration of a free press. And yet he said it all the time, never held back, because he didn't know what fascism was. The guy had no intellect, so he's not able really to differentiate between when he says something about somebody or some organization or some country that is so horrific by everybody else's standards. He didn't know because the guy doesn't have a brain. I'm really enjoying the silence of the Joe Biden administration, like just the silence. Like, I don't want to read about a scandal every day or a crisis every 15 minutes. He says, how do we have a free press when they have to use advertisers to pay bills, says Riyadh. Well, it is possible to do both. It is possible. We do it in the UK. We have commercial news channels that have adverts, and the press is still free and regulated. It is completely possible. But again, if you've grown up in America, and let's say if you were born in 1977 or later, it is almost impossible for you, and I presume, Riyadh, you were born way after 1977, but I believe, because you see, in 1987 is when they stopped regulating the news media in America to be balanced. This is when they lifted the law called the Fairness Doctrine. They lifted that law. So it meant that news didn't have to be balanced anymore. And so the reason I say 1977 is because you might start watching the news when you're about 10. So if you were born in 77, by 87, the news was effectively unregulated and unbalanced. And so a whole generation of people, including you, Riyadh, have grown up in a country where you've never known it to be any different. Where the news media has always been biased. So of course you don't. I came back. We had a very weird technical thing there. Everybody's computers just crashed just then. Everybody's. Something strange happened. It's really interesting to me. Anyway, I'm back. Also, the lighting seems to be different now. It's not actually the lighting, it's the camera, but it's just very interesting that could happen in such a moment. Michael, thank you for joining us. Nice to know that you're here. Welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony. It's 10:21. Yes, something just went really interestingly awry that we've never experienced before. It was fun. Did it crash your computer, Carla? My computer completely crashed. Like, the whole thing went off, which is ridiculous, really, because, it's got battery and backup and everything. So something there just caused I don't know what it was. Vanished. Yeah. Fascinating. That was fascinating. Anyway, let's get back to some of your messages, because so many people have been texting and sending messages as we discuss press freedom and the like. Michael's in Kansas. Riyadh's in California. Riyadh says, I still remember my early 20s when I started to know more about what was going on. Enough to know the news outlets were not being truthful, and I think during Trump's administration, the wheels came off completely on the news outlets. Well, that's because they didn't know how to cover Donald Trump. Like, they'd never experienced somebody like him before. And so instead of having a meeting and going, okay, how are we going to handle this? They suddenly got rich because of there being a scandal every day. They just ran with it. They actually were thrilled that he was so horrendous because it was ratings. And it actually did a huge disservice to democracy that the news media supported the rise of fascism in the West, that they thought it was okay to allow him to say these things about, banning Muslims from entering the country for no reason and building a wall around the US to prevent people from coming in. Of course, it didn't do anything like that. And yeah, even subjects not related to him, of course, I understand that, Riyadh, but he really did change. He really was like a step change. But, the main channels like CBS, NBC, and ABC, they never really reported untruths. But they might have had a slight political bias depending on who the president was at the time. And this has really been the problem, hasn't it? That, the country has become so divided because of the news media. It's not just because of our political leaders. The bias is born because of the news media. So literally when I meet new people, the first thing I say is, where do you get your news? And my landlord, who is a Trump supporter and a racist and is conservative and gets all his news from Fox and Facebook, he lives in a complete alternative universe to me. He thinks that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president who stole the election, that it was Venezuela and China that rigged the election, and that he thinks that Biden should go to prison and Fauci should go to prison, and he has a completely different view. I'm actually trying to get him to come and do an interview with me. I would really like to interview him for 2 hours. Riyadh says headlines and YouTube clips are part of the problem. It's true. But the other thing is that people are working harder and they get less time off. And that means that people don't have time to study and to read and to investigate. And so a brief 30-second clip that drops into your social media feed is what people are craving. And that satisfies their desire to kind of get some data, get some info. And yet, and yet, it's not enough. It's almost too short. But, it was designed this way because wages never rose with inflation. And so earnings are so low compared to the cost of living that you end up with people who just don't have the time to take time off to read or to even protest. I think this about free protest in the US. People don't protest here. When they do, it's like a gigantic protest that has been building up, bubbling up, BLM or Women's March, but invariably it's the people on the left that do that. the people on the right seem to march with tiki torches and Nazi flags, as was shown in Charlottesville, chanting the phrase, "Jews will not replace us." And that was 4 years ago now. And there was another one of these Nazi marches in Washington last week. So, working so hard that you don't get time off to protest. I mean, in England, and this is not accurate across the board, but if you've got a boss that understands the way the world is, and you have a cause that is close to your heart, and there's a protest, a rally, or a march going on, and you say to your boss, "There's a rally going on, and I want to join the rally to exercise my free right to a protest," your boss will give you the time off. Your boss will say, "Sure, go protest." Not in all occupations, but there are many where people work for organizations that are, care about people and culture. And if there is a protest, sure, take the day off, go protest. But in America, the idea of joining a protest, if you have a work schedule, it's so competitive, wages are so low, that people effectively cannot take a minute off. And that's why when it comes to bank holidays or public holidays or Christmas and New Year, Americans work through the whole thing. You only get 2 weeks holiday. Well, in England, you get at least 4 weeks plus bank holidays. And do you know how many bank holidays we have? We have 9. So you're effectively getting 5 or 6 weeks off in the UK. That's like standard holiday time throughout the year. It depends what job you do. The other thing is, and this is actually probably the crux of this, you're not in America, you're not allowed a sick day. You can't go sick. In England, you can have an unlimited number of sick days. Whereas in America, I think there is a limit, isn't there? Depending on the contract you sign, you're allowed, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sick days. But in the UK, the contracts don't specify sick day numbers, because if you're sick, you're sick. You just have to get, what do they call that note that the doctor has to write you? What's that sick note? Is it just called a sick note? Sick note. If you get a sick note from your doctor, you can be off as long as you like. You still get paid, depending on what job you work in. I mean, if you're a freelancer like me, I've never had a job that is like a properly paid, regular paid job where my whole life, if I've gone sick, then I don't get paid. But most regular jobs is, if you're unwell, then they are committed to you. It's ironic that in America, many jobs pay for your health care, but they won't pay for you to be sick. They'll pay for the insurance for you to get health care, but they won't pay you when you are sick. And so every contract you sign, Riyadh says, your employer determines the terms of this. And this is the case. We are living in a country here in the US that it makes people work very hard. And you're made to think that work is everything. Riyadh says it's the insurance scam is a scam. Yeah, it's true. Now, let's use another country as an example. Let's use Norway. Okay, I've worked in Norway, so I know a little bit about the Norwegian way of working. Their workday is Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. No lunch break. No lunch break. You eat your lunch at your desk, but you work 7 till 3 and then you go and hang with your family. Family time. They close the liquor stores on the weekend. You want to buy liquor, you buy it during the week. Can't buy liquor on the weekends. And in fact, I think that there was one country, I think it might be in the Middle East actually, I think it might be the United Arab Emirates or Dubai or one of these cities that I was reading about. They're actually switching their week around. Did you hear about this? Sarah, thank you for joining the stream in North Carolina. It's 10:30 here on the West Coast. 1:30 Eastern. I think it's somewhere in the Middle East. They're switching their Sunday around so that their week currently goes Sunday through Thursday. So they get Friday and Saturday as the weekend. Yeah, that's right. It's in the Middle East. Currently in the Middle East, Friday and Saturday is the weekend. Maybe it's to do with prayer. Maybe it's to do with the Muslim faith. Maybe Friday is a holy day. Anyway, they're switching it to be more traditional. So they're switching it so that the working week is going to be Monday through Friday. But isn't it interesting? Because, officially, a week starts with a Sunday. That's the official start of the week is Sunday, not Monday. But in most Western societies, we've specified Monday as the start of the working week. But it's not, it's Sunday. What's the difference between a Sunday and a Monday? Well, it's to do with the church, isn't it, invariably? It's to do with religion. The holy day of rest, or the Sabbath, or, Saturday being the Sabbath, or Friday night from sundown through sundown on Saturday. So that's why we designate certain days of the week as work days versus rest days. This goes back to our conversation at the very beginning of the show about the creation. God created the world in what was it? Did he create it in 7 days and rested on the 8th day? I think he rested on the 8th day. This is one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had. I'm really enjoying it. Because, the construct of time, and this goes back to like the space-time continuum and Stephen Hawking. And I only know this when I've been under the influence of marijuana, which is legal here in California. But my time shifts. So like I cannot get my head around whether or not I am living in the present or whether I am living in the past or the future. Because for me, when I take gummies particularly, time shifts. And, in order to maintain a normal or relatively normal sense of reality, we have to have a clock. We have to be able to see. I have a big clock in front of me. I can see the seconds counting away. We have to know whether it's a weekday or a weekend. These things are the confines of structure that enable us to feel like we're standing the right way up. It's a little bit like when you walk on the precipice of the Grand Canyon and you look down and you lose all sense of balance because of this chasm ahead of you. And you're not sure whether you're standing up or lying down, or loop-the-loop in an aerobatic display. Any of these things that question our balance, our sense of right now, our sense of what is actually happening within the confines of time. So I know it's 10:34 here on the Pacific Coast. I know that because the clock is telling me. But what if we didn't have clocks? What if we had to go resort back to sundials as they did in the olden days and measure our sense of time by the sun? I mean, it's just as accurate. Of course, if you ever look at a sundial, people still have sundials in their garden. They're really pretty. They're very simple things, but the positioning obviously is essential. And as the sun comes up, it hits the morning, and then the sun works its way around the sundial as it moves through the sky. Or as well, the sun doesn't move. The sun stays still as the earth turns. Still waiting for a message from someone saying, "What do you mean the sun doesn't move? It moves all the time." Apparently not. Conspiracy theory. So here we are, in this on this planet where normality is only really measured, like our present day is only really measured by the day of the week, the time of day. Sarah, hi, thank you for joining. And Michael has joined us as well. Hello, Michael. Thank you very much for being part of the show. And Harper, Casey, Rachel, Luke. Nice to know that you're listening to Backchannel this morning here. Let's go back to what we were discussing earlier, because there's so many things to look at this morning, and I really don't want to waste a moment more. Should we jump on to the Seattle Times just quickly? They lead with squatters evicted from Hillside Motel on Aurora Avenue North. Oh, good. Oh, good. I don't understand why they would even put a squatter's story on the front of the Seattle Times. It just doesn't make sense to me. All it's doing is scaring people, making people angry towards the people that don't have homes, you know? Anyway. Cataract surgery is linking a reduced risk of dementia. Now that is fascinating. Adults who've undergone cataract surgery have a lower chance of developing dementia. Findings that could open the door to understanding further connections between eye and brain health, a new University of Washington study reported last week. It says, according to the study published in JAMA, Internal Medicine, older adults who have cataract surgery have a nearly 30% lower risk of developing dementia for at least 10 years after the operation, compared with those who did not. Wow! Do you know what cataract surgery is? Shall I just explain? It's very interesting to me, the way it's done. Because you know they do this in war zones, or they do it in developing nations. They just set up a tent. It's very easy. And if you're squeamish, look away now. They make a very small incision in the eye, and they just slide out this disc of mushy grey mush that has... A cataract is basically a growth in the eye in front of the lens. That means that your vision becomes cloudy. You're effectively looking through a diffused lens. And so the surgery is very simple. It takes a few moments. The hard part of the surgery is, the anesthetic and making sure that people sit still. But it's just a little incision, and then they slide it out. And they do this literally in the outback or in the bush or, just they can do it anywhere. And you may remember there was like an epidemic of cataract in Africa. And they set up these cataract clinics, and people would stand in line and they would literally cure people's sight. And people who have cataract surgery say, and I quote from reading about this over the years, it is instant sight. It's instant. To be given the freedom away from that diffusion. Just imagine it. It's like wearing sunglasses that only have a few little dots. And the great thing about it is that it's external, effectively. It's within the lens, but it's just in front of the iris. And so they just slice and pull it out. And I don't even think they need to stitch your eye. I think that they just give you drops and it heals. That's how they do it so quickly. It doesn't need to be stitched. It's amazing to me that we learned that you can just slide out a cataract. If you're not squeamish, watch the surgery on YouTube. Like, watch it happening in African villages and see how it changes people's lives. See the smile on people's faces when they walk in blind and they leave sighted. It's a miracle. It is literally a miracle. I'm sure a lot of those people are from tribes who believe in, miracles and such, and will apportion the success of this surgery to whatever their belief system. And good on them. I think it's amazing. I do love surgery. Like, if you want to talk about surgery on the show, I'll happily talk about it. I could richly describe... I was explaining on the weekend to somebody about brain surgery, because I find neurosurgery to be fascinating. But the thing I find most interesting about it is the fact that the patient has to be awake. It's fascinating. They have to be awake. I won't go into detail now because you might be eating. But, the probing of the brain while the patient is awake, removing a cancer or something while the patient is awake. They get them to count up and down, do the alphabet, just to check that they're not removing parts of the brain that are involved in speech function or memory. Because, we use a very small portion of our brain. The brain is a huge plate of jelly between our ears, and we only really use bits of it. Some of it is completely redundant. I mean, obviously, Einstein's brain, he probably used more of it than me. He certainly used more of it than I do. My brain really just it's just tells me when I'm hungry. Anyway, I don't know how we got onto that. Oh yeah, cataract. Very interesting. Holiday rush meant deadly tornado roared through Amazon site at its busiest time. This is why I don't understand how so few people were hurt in this Amazon warehouse. This is the tornado that ripped through the Midwest. It's incredible, really. This was in Edwardsville, Illinois. After a full day of delivering packages north of St. Louis, suddenly an alarm blared. They all ran into a shelter. Oh, so maybe the Amazon warehouse had a storm shelter, like underneath it. And that's why maybe everybody piled in there. That would be very interesting to me. Do you think that's what happened? Maybe they all piled into the storm shelter. Harper, welcome back. I think we've got one more newspaper. Let me have a little look here. Oh yeah, we have the West Virginia Charleston Gazette. Over 100 feared dead after tornadoes. Same story. Workers on the night shift at Mayfield Consumer Products were in the heart of the holiday rush, turning out Christmas candles when a tornado closed in on the factory, and the word went out to duck and cover. Cannabis Education Center in Huntington ready to open. This is statistically, West Virginia has become an epicenter of opioid deaths in the United States of the past decade. Huntington has long been considered ground zero for the epidemic. Well, the overdose rates were as much as 10 times higher than the national average, and the nation's COVID-19 pandemic made the nation's drug overdose epidemic worse, with overdoses reaching a record high in 2020. The reasons for this opioid epidemic incidence in West Virginia, according to experts, have been a combination of socio-cultural factors, a depressed economy, lack of education, and a high rate of prescribing and dispensing of prescription opioids. Well, that's why the pharmacies, I think Walgreens and CVS, got hit with a lawsuit over this recently, didn't they? As well as the drug makers. While city and state leaders in government and law enforcement continue to battle the crisis, a new medical marijuana dispensary company, TerraLeaf, at 2018 3rd Avenue in Huntington, in the former Stadium Frame Building, says it's come to help. They say we primarily chose Huntington, West Virginia to expand due to the opioid crisis going on in this area. We've been reaching out to the community to educate them about who we are and what we do. The space is divided into to offer community education in addition to a dispensary. TerraLeaf's Education Center will provide classes and information on different elements of cannabis, including strains and methods of consumption. I don't know. I mean, is cannabis supposed to be a solution to the opioid crisis? Try and get people hooked on weed rather than on methamphetamine? I mean, maybe it works. I don't know. I'm not an expert. 10:44. I do want to talk about this Mark Meadows story very quickly because it's just very interesting. Mark Meadows is, of course, the former chief of staff for Donald Trump and the Trump administration. And the Capitol Attack Panel is set to recommend contempt charges against him now. This move comes as lawmakers released new details about thousands of emails and texts that he handed over to the committee. I mean, let me just precurse this with the fact that this guy is an idiot. Like, he really is one of the most stupid people. You hear him talk, the guy's an idiot, and he was the chief of staff. He's a proper idiot. He didn't even realize that amongst all these emails and text messages he sent was a link to a PowerPoint presentation that across 36 pages detailed the coup attempt, the planned coup to blame the election fraud on Venezuela and China, to say the voting machines were rigged, to call in the National Guard and have them protect insurrectionists and protect people who voted using paper ballots. It's so offensive. The whole thing is backwards. Anyway, the House panel investigating the January 6th insurrection at the US Capitol is set to recommend contempt charges against the former White House chief of staff, as lawmakers are releasing new details about thousands of emails and texts he handed over to the committee. In laying out the case for the contempt vote, the 9-member panel released a 51-page report late on Sunday that details its questions about the documents he's already provided, including 6,600 pages of records taken from personal email accounts and around 2,000 text messages. The report gives details about Meadows' effort to help Donald Trump overturn his defeat in the presidential election, communications with members of Congress and organizers of a rally held in the morning of the insurrection, and frantic messages among aides and others as the violent attack unfolded that day. The panel says it also wants to know more about whether Trump, and this is one of the most interesting lines in this whole thing, I've already read this story this morning. The panel also wants to know more about whether Trump was engaged in discussions regarding response of the National Guard, which was delayed for hours as the violence escalated and the rioters brutally beat police guarding the Capitol building. The report says the documents provided by Meadows show that he sent an email to an unidentified person saying that the Guard would be present to protect pro-Trump people and that more would be available on standby. The committee does not give additional details about the email. I mean, this is damning, isn't it? This is damning. The committee says in the report that Trump's former White House aide is uniquely situated to provide key information, having straddled an official role in the White House and unofficial role related to Mr. Trump's re-election campaign. The contempt vote comes after more than 2 months of negotiations with Meadows and his lawyer, and the panel has also struggled to obtain information from some of Trump's other top aides, such as his longtime ally Steve Bannon. I mean, this is the thing about Mark Meadows. His testimony would be key. He was Trump's top aide at the time. He was with him in the White House as the rioters breached the building. I mean, he was there. He was coordinating. He was effectively the conduit between the White House and the insurrectionists. Dare I? Welcome, Ooga Booga Booga Booga, has just joined us. Is that your real name? I presume so. Anything goes these days. I mean, this is the story that really gets me the most, is this idea that he said in an email that the National Guard would be at the Capitol to protect pro-Trump people when Congress met to certify Biden's election victory. He literally, I mean, this is actually treason. This is a crime against the United States. The message promised many more troops will be on standby if need be. The North Carolina congressman, former North Carolina congressman, could face up to a year in jail if convicted on criminal contempt of Congress charges. Plus, what about the treason charge? What about plotting against your own country? I mean, it's just beggars belief that these people were like in charge. In the days leading up to what would become the worst attack on the Capitol since Major General Robert Ross ordered British troops to set it ablaze in 1814, soldiers with the DC Army National Guard, known as the Capitol Guardians, were tasked with some traffic control duties around downtown Washington, but were not assigned to be anywhere near the Capitol. Oh, really? There was so much evidence leading up to this that there was going to be an event. Do you remember Steve Bannon on his own podcast literally alluded to the fact that there was going to be a riot? On his own podcast, he said it out loud. There's a recording of it. They knew. They all knew. All of them knew. They knew there was going to be a rally. They knew there was going to be a riot. They knew there was going to be an invasion of the Capitol because, of course, you had Lauren Boebert showing people around the day before. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene. You had Ted Cruz. You had Matt Gaetz. All of these people, all completely behind this insurrection. And then, of course, some of them, like Ted Cruz, standing up and lambasting it in the Senate. The hypocrisy was rife. The The hours-long delay in redeploying DC Guard troops to the capital has become a flashpoint in the investigation into the day's events, with Defense Department leadership blaming General William Walker, the DC Guard's former commanding general and current House of Representatives Sergeant-at-Arms, for the delay. But Colonel Earl Matthews, an Army lawyer who was a top legal aide to General Walker that day, has revealed in a memorandum that two top Defense Department officials, Generals Charles Flynn and Walter Piatt. Hang on, Charles Flynn is Michael Flynn's brother. Michael Flynn, the disgraced, twice-lying former military official, Trump's best friend, his brother is General Flynn, Charles Flynn. I'm sure of it. Well, you know which side he's batting for. Sorry? More people joining in here. Eileen, thank you for joining us. In Illinois, welcome to Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. We're just discussing the Capitol insurrection, but more importantly, we're looking at what happened, effectively what happened on the day. It's a very interesting story, this. Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, being implicated in so much of this chaos. So according to Colonel Matthews, Generals Flynn and Piatt did not immediately act to redeploy the Guard unit from traffic control to repelling the pro-Trump mob because of concerns about the optics of having uniformed soldiers defending the Capitol. The veteran military lawyer wrote that USCP Chief Sun's plea for support, made at 2:30 p.m. that day, was met with indifference from General Platt, who replied, "I don't like the visual of the National Guard standing a police line with the Capitol in the background." Wow. Sounds like a political bias to me. Sounds like they all knew. They all knew. It's all going to come out. You know, that's what we can look forward to. It's all going to come out. And we're effectively going to find out, you know, exactly what happened. My concern is that there will not be anything like the amount of convictions that there should be, because, you know, people don't really know what to do with treasonous people anymore. In England, about 200 years ago, they used to chop their heads off. It doesn't happen anymore. We wanted to talk about Anne Rice. We didn't really get a chance. She is the author of the supernatural novel. She wrote Interview with the Vampire, Vampire Chronicles. The best-selling author has died at the age of 80. And Christopher Rice, her son, said in a statement yesterday that Rice had passed away due to complications resulting from a stroke, adding, "The immensity of our family's grief cannot be overstated." She wrote more than 30 books, but was best known for her debut novel, Interview with the Vampire. Didn't they make that into a wonderful film with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman? I seem to think so. Wasn't that the film they met on or something? Or was that... No, that was something... Anyway. I do love a vampire movie. Hopefully you do too. So yes, that introduced the world to the saga of the vampire Lestat and moved from 18th century Louisiana through the next 200 years. Published in 1976, it was made into a film. There we go, Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst. Maybe Nicole Kidman wasn't in it. I can't remember. No? Was that something else? Anyway, I'm going to come back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. That's 12 o'clock Eastern. Stay with Backchannel for your pal Hal next. Have a great day.